This video contains strong language, used in a funny context. Viewer discretion advised.
While there are plenty of great games and quite a large portion of titles that are simply average, there are fortunately very few completely irredeemable and atrocious titles.
Some video games have become well known for negative reception for various reasons, such as criticism about their gameplay, graphics, sound, or other elements.
So prepare yourself for the long-awaited, the shit-tastic, the top 100 worst video games.
This is the top 100 worst video games. Number 100. Stalin vs. Martians.
This game is supposed to be a real-time strategy, but instead it's a buggy, unplayable mess with bad design decisions, suffering from stupid AI, bad enemy placement, crap mission structure, and no attempts at humor. That music videos were produced for the game failed to make an impact.
Number 99. Virtuoso.
Virtuoso was a hilariously bad shooter. It's hard to figure out what kind of game it is anyways, mainly since the combination of horrible graphics and a terrifyingly bad camera. Maybe that was a good thing, since the game was terrible altogether. The enemies are generic. Let's see here, we have spiders, bats, giant spiders, more bats, and a giant spider boss. What the hell are they thinking?
Number 98. Crush Hour.
Basically, the game's plot is just ridiculous that it just sounds like a bad idea right off the bat. So the premise of the game is completely simple. Some of the top WWE superstars driving around in cars just trying to destroy each other. Crush Hour plays a lot like other car combat games out there. In fact, it plays very much like a stripped down, simplistic version of Twisted Metal. When it comes to graphics and sound, Crush Hour just begins to fall apart. Everything in the game feels extremely rushed and underpolished. The game itself isn't the worst video game on the list, but it's still up there. It's only for die-hard WWE fans, and for everyone else, they should just play Twisted Metal instead.
Number 97. Spirit of Speed, 1937.
Spirit of Speed, or at least its Dreamcast version, was meant to simulate the 30s Roadsters race. The game was routinely trashed for its atrocious loading times, bad controls, lack of multiplayer mode, and mediocre production values and boring drawn-out tracks. Quite fittingly, Acclaim briefly resurrected the much-revealed LJN label for this game only.
Number 96. Bomberman Act Zero.
Gone are all the cool-looking characters from the previous games, and instead you get big, futuristic-looking robots who all act the same way. Gone also is the over-the-top head view, and instead you get a camera which is placed behind the Bomberman you control. The gameplay is basically the same, but in a 3D environment as you run around past giant blocks placing your bombs to kill all your enemies. Although generally considered as a classic Bomberman, Act Zero gets boring really fast, and for a 360 game, the graphics are not that good at all. Do not attempt to buy it, not even for your gamer score.
Number 95. Two Worlds.
Two Worlds is an absolute failure in just about every respect on the Xbox 360. Two Worlds offers up a fairly impressive and certainly huge graphical environment for the player to run rampant throughout. The desire to do so is swiftly fractured by frequent screen freezes, while the game engine struggles to process the next open expanse. With some horrible voice acting and facial and movement animation, many players wondered if this game was surely classed as a next-generation game. While some reviews across the internet do sum up some of the best features of the game, the huge ton of drawbacks place this game on this list for the sole reason: get Oblivion or Skyrim instead.
Number 94. Leisure Suit Larry, box office bust.
The original set of Leisure Suit Larry games were intelligent, tongue-in-cheek adventure titles. But with box office bust, the moronic generation had to have its own input. The game seems to have been written by someone that thinks swearing is funny just on its own merit and is completely missing the point of the original game's appeal. Rather than being an adventure game, Box Office Bust has you running around a movie studio taking part in the world's worst platform game. Without a doubt, one of the worst next-gen games available, with nearly no redeeming qualities or interesting ideas, with next to nothing enjoyable to offer players. With no circumstance should anyone ever purchase this game, ever.
Number 93. VIP.
Oh god. The whole game is based either on controller directions or button controls. They pop up on the screen and you press a button within a time limit. Once the correct buttons are pressed, then you see a very sloppy animation between the characters. Some parts of the game lets you use firearms, but all you get is a cursor, which you move and shoot. The game itself doesn't take too long to complete, about 2 hours worth, and that's it. The game suffers from bad animation, and the characters look poorly designed. VIP doesn't really offer any enjoyment or hardly any replay value, and by the end of it, your hands will be aching. Enjoy.
Number 92. Gods and Generals.
Gods and Generals is the result of hopelessly misguided effort to produce something that would be a marketing tool first and a game second. The game suffered from poor frame rate, lack of a proper physics engine, and horribly broken AI. The combination of horrible AI and physics would often lead enemies running into walls with a futile attempt to get away from the player. At other times, enemies would not activate properly, leading them to stand motionless while the player just shot them to death.
Number 91. Operation Matriarchy.
This game has one of the strangest storylines to ever show up in an FPS game ever, where a virus turns all of the women in some space colony into a hive of men enslaving monsters. Your character wakes up from a sleep capsule. The game looks particularly good, except suffers from a huge amount of problems. These include enemies that are dumb as bricks. There's no decent AI behavior, meaning they just rush the player mercilessly. The extremely cramped level design makes fighting and navigating extremely confusing and frustrating, and the animations are simply laughable. The sound effects are annoying, and there's absolutely no music at all.
Number 90. Legend of Success Joe.
A horrible excuse of a boxing game based on the manga anime Ashita Nojo. The gameplay alternates between very primitive beat-em-up segments in which Joe fights a few wimpy enemies that die in one punch before fighting a very long boss, and boxing matches based on famous battles of the series. The controls are clunky and unresponsive, the music sounds like shit, and, even though this game was produced for one of the most powerful systems of the early 1990s, the graphics are ugly with an overbright color palette, non-existent animation, hunchbacked character sprites. It was one of the few early Neo Geo titles that stayed in Japan for good reason.
Number 89. Land of the Dead, Road to Fiddler's Green.
Before the Left 4 Dead series, there was this awful prequel to a pretty bad George Romero movie, with graphics that belonged on a system that belonged on the Famicom, controls being clunky, technical bugs, strange glitches, and AI that manages to make the zombies look even more stupid and dumb than they were supposed to be. Fiddler's Green may be the worst undead first-person shooter ever made.
Number 88. Bruce Lee, Quest of the Dragon.
Now this is one of gaming's greatest tragedies. You take a legend kung fu star and put him in a punch and kick game. The graphics are good, but not good enough. The controls are great and the game is pretty fun. For about 5 minutes. Once you get to the third level, it gets really repetitive. Punching and kicking is the same generic thing over and over and over again. There's nothing redeeming about this game other than the picture of Bruce Lee on the cover. Don't even think about renting or playing this, otherwise you'll offend the legend himself.
Number 87. Zuzervezzer.
Vusar Vasar is a racing game with a stupidly ridiculous premise. Basically, it's a racing competition where floating chariots are carried by giant animal-shaped humongous mech ship. We couldn't make it up if we tried. And yes, this game is terrible. The graphics are horrendously pixelated and full of clipping, even though the game ran on the Sega Dreamcast. The controls are bad because you couldn't slow down the vehicle or even stop. The racetracks have laser turrets which are expressly designed to fire on you for no explained reason whatsoever. It's not hard to see why it didn't even leave Japan.
Number 86. Fight Club.
The fact that this game is broken goes without saying. But there's also the fact, for some reason, the game features Fred Durst, and if you don't know who Fred Durst is, he's the frontman of Limp Bizkit, as well as the director of movies. In fact, he has nothing to do with this movie, or the book, for that matter. And if you ignore the fact that Fight Club ties into the movie and novel and consider it purely on its merits as a game, what you're left with is an undercooked fighting game, not much better looking than a steaming pile of dog shit. And when you also consider the game's botched attempts at including some tie-ins with the movie, the results look even worse.
Number 85. Bad Day LA.
Bad Day LA manages to combine everything people dislike about video games with inappropriate toilet humour, supposedly as social commentary. It's hard to believe that it came from the same company that gave us the American Mickey's Alice as a decade earlier. Stupid gameplay, bland graphics, and bad controls ending up being a completely boring title.
Number 84. Dragon Ball Z Sagas Evolution.
Beginning players will probably get frustrated with the skills needed to control a hero, while experienced players may not be impressed with the bland level design and low-resolution graphics. Camera angles don't even change throughout, making for a predictable and boring gaming experience. The environments feel bland, and the level layout is completely and equally uninspired. To sum it up, there's just not much to recommend here, especially considering the fact that Sagas is a full-priced game.
Number 83. Stargazer.
Background graphics make no attempt to blend with the tiles, and when combined with the dark, dull Palais choice, it ends up looking abysmal. The battle system is clunky, slow, and unforgiving. Select the wrong battle option? Too bad, there's no button to back it up. So the game is so bad that Japanese fans have given it the title of Legendary Shit Game.
Number 82. Virtual Bart.
All the flaws and annoyances from Bart's Nightmare can be found in this game, only that this time they are, if possible, even worse. We have to play more mini-games, only that this time they suck even more. The mini-games are highly imaginative and all of them could have been great, but the controls are terrible and the few that have decent controls are boring as hell. Virtual Bart is only for hardcore Simpsons fans.
Number 81. Hour of Victory.
World War II shooters have become a genre unto themselves thanks to the popularity of the Medal of Honor and Call of Duty franchise. But when a wannabe upstart like Hour of Victory comes along from Midway Games, you have to realize why there are so many World War II titles and so many reasons why not to play them. The visuals in this game are subpar to say the least. Hour of Victory has graphics that look like they were drawn by a kid who messed with his coloring book. The audio is laughable, the physics are terrible, and the frame rate is choppy, making the game look far worse than it already does. This game needed a lot more than just polish to it. It needed to go straight back to the drawing board.
Number 80. 3D Balls.
The setting for the game is pure gibberish, random phrases and weird photos, but what destroys this game is the controls. It makes it unplayable that you have no idea how to control your fighter. The AI, however, has no problem controlling its fighters and will wipe the floor with you. The music and sounds are strange, almost erotic, with girls moaning and guys grunting.
Number 79. Rondi.
Rondi is infamous for killing off the Majin Tensei branch of the Megami Tensei franchise, and its preview demo alone caused such a negative reaction that thousands of Japanese gamers cancelled their pre-orders for the game on a scale that was virtually unprecedented in Japanese game history. It would take another 12 years for Megaten fans to see a strategy RPG in the franchise with the release of Devil Survivor. Hardcore Gaming 101 said that the game has some of the ugliest graphics for the 32-bit era.
Number 78. Isle of the Dead.
Isle of the Dead is a strong contender for the worst FPS of all time. Coming out the same year as Doom, its engine is more on the level of Wolfenstein 3D. Right from the start, the game offers enemies which can tear the player to pieces in seconds and respawn right after you leave the room. The graphics and sound are horrible, with nothing at all to tell the player where to go, and the difficulty is way too hard. To top it all off, quitting the game is referred to as the coward's way out in the menu, and even more so, you're greeted with a graphic depiction of a shotgun suicide.
Number 77. Creep Clash.
Oh my god, you guys are never gonna believe this. Creep Crash is a 2D fighting game that pits 3D polygons against one another in a battle to reign as the next lord of Necrovania. So what it comes down to is a jumbled mess of fighters, which is terrible to look at, horrible to play, and excruciating to listen to. Creep Clash features MIDI background music and a lengthy graphical introduction with still pictures and digital voiceovers, which none of them really matter as much as you're probably searching for the uninstall button right about now.
Number 76. Hooters Road Trip.
With a terrible soundtrack featuring tunes like Candy Pants and nearly unmanageable auto controls, it's a wonder this game got out of the gate at all. Gameplay-wise, you'll be motoring a slow, ugly polygon model that breaks down all the time and is quite likely to explode at random intervals. Enjoyment is hard to come by in a game like this because of the frequent crashing. Road Trip is a horrid, wretched, abysmal excuse for a racer.
Number 75. Winter Race 3D.
Playing an old, somewhat obscure, low-budget game, you can't expect much, really. Amateur 3D models, fuzzy textures, constant bugs, lazy sound design, no music, and only 5 levels to play. Gameplay-wise is frustrating, especially when you're timed against the clock. Hitting anything in the game will make the player bounce around 90 degrees to a random angle. Sometimes you might get caught in a single area because you keep hitting some tree or wall all the time. Winter Race 3D is a very poor, lazy, and lacking low-budget winter sports game that you should definitely stay away from. There are far better sports racing games out there than try this.
Number 74. Ninja Bread Man.
Ninja Bread Man isn't simply bad, it's fucking atrocious. A platformer game that looked like it was made in less than a day, with incredibly bland textures, especially for the Wii. This is the kind of game you'll see real cheap in the bargain bins, fellas. It's still not worth your purchase, and there are a lot of better games that handle and look a lot better than this fucking mess.
Number 73. Highlight.
Unfortunately, regardless of whether the game was any good on earlier systems, it was borderline unplayable on the NES, complete with hints on porting disaster. The graphics were bland and the music was an annoying loop. The battle mechanics were practically non-existent, often resulting to charging at enemies pressing A. There were no clues anywhere of what to do or where to go, and the in-game save feature was useless because the cartridge did not have a battery.
Number 72. Hard Driven.
Hard Driven was horrible in every department. The graphics looked like it was made of Lego, the screeching of the tiles was unbearable, and the gameplay was pure hell. Maybe the name of the game was appropriately named, as the vehicle you use handled more like a semi-truck than a car. In summary, Hard Driven was labelled as a terrible driving game and one that all should avoid at all costs.
Number 71. Universal Combat.
Universal Combat is a budget game. Yeah, so if that didn't turn you off right away, then listen to this. It had an intense amount of hype surrounding it for many reasons, and we honestly expected it to be a lot better than it was. The textures are bland and appear to be incredibly low resolution, especially on the planet and when viewing the planet from space. The sound is bland, and the Vox systems can be annoying as hell. Virtually every shooter made in the last decade looks and plays far better than Universal Combat. Glitchy problems such as bitmapped foliage and trees that you can walk through, and the game has absolutely no sense of physics whatsoever. So you could witness your squad walking up and down sheer cliff faces. How does that happen?
Number 70. Total Recall.
A massive disappointment then that for the game based on the film, everything had to go so wrong. Rather than simply taking the plot and trying to translate it, the game developers decided to create a rubbish platform game that bears no relation to either the film or the book it's based on. The only thing that the film and the game share are the name. Add to that the fact that it's impossible to play because of the unresponsive control system and the appalling graphics. It's one of the worst games ever.
Number 69. Speed Rage.
This forgetful attempt at a driving game will give you a serious headache in just under a minute. It's basically a shamble of bright colors, fast-paced gameplay with ridiculous animations, especially the car wheels. The game arrow doesn't help, and it's more of a hindrance than anything, because 98% of the time you don't know where the hell you're driving and what's around the next corner. A failure of a driving game in all categories. Man, I'm getting pissed off here, aren't I?
Number 68. Rushing Punch.
Rushing Punch is one of those hypnotically bad games. The ones where your mind is telling you that it's awful, but you cannot put the controller down, because you just want to get over with and beat it. Rushing Punch is a 3D final fight gone horribly, horribly wrong. You take your character and punch and kick your way through the same type of, free enemies over and over again, until you fight a boss. Everyone walks around in the comical manner, which gives the impression they're dancing to the surprisingly catchy music. The enemies all bunch up together and attack at once, which is annoying. There's no menu system, no game over screen, and when you beat it, the game simply ends. You drop back to the dashboard and that's it. Just ignore this game like it's the plague.
This video contains strong language, used in a funny context. Viewer discretion advised. Number 67. Send in Jimmy.
Send in Jimmy. Oh god, I'm reminded of this. It's a first-person shooter that looks extremely like GoldenEye, and thus is bound to get some of the gamers to try it out. But unfortunately, the game's technical problems present more frustration than a decent gameplay experience. The game suffers from an unfair AI behavior with bad draw distance thick as fog. The game also suffers from excessive skipping with every 10 feet of the game, and has to pause and load up more terrain. And major slowdown occurs when there are far too many enemies on the screen. Yes, it's ugly and broken, but if you want to try it out for yourself, then by all means, be our guest.
Number 66. Home Improvement.
This game is loosely based on the once popular show Home Improvement. It's like if you made a bad version of Jurassic Park for the Genesis and put Tim Allen in it with a few Tool Time references. This is that game. For the most part, the game handles okay, but when you're put into the first level with dinosaurs, you end up questioning things. This game's supposed to be a family do-it-yourself show, right?
Number 65. Beb's Kids.
The general gameplay really just isn't any fun. You go through generic platforming levels and beat up things by using repetitive punching and kicking attacks that are hard to execute because the controls are so stiff. Most of the problems stem from the unforgiving time limit for each level, the awkward control, and the horrible collision detection, the looping and somewhat grating sound effects and music, and the fact that it takes tens if not dozens of hits for your basic attack to take down one single enemy.
Number 64. Drake of the 99 Dragons.
There is nothing about this game that works. The fighting, the graphics, the storyline. With how many early Xbox games that were terrible, it's amazing the system survived long enough to hit its groove. Drake is one game that most likely won't top anyone's list to make it Xbox 360 compatible.
Number 63. Super Noah's Ark 3D.
This pitiful title was surely the worst game ever released for the Super Nintendo. You play as Old Testament folk Noah with the task of rounding up all the animals wandering around the Ark. Ironically, this attempt to instill Christian values in young gamers was built using the Wolfenstein 3D engine, one of the most violent games of its time. It's safe to say that the only kids unfortunate enough to play it were those fundamentalist parents who forced them to.
Number 62. A Bug's Life.
What was a bad game on PlayStation is now an awful game on the Nintendo 64. With uninspired levels that seem to have no basis whatsoever to the movie, and extremely touchy controls, it's a wonder who this game was even targeted to. The game suffers from horrible draw distance, with unbearably bad fog which clips objects and dysfunctions shapes. This game is almost impossible for hardcore gamers because of its flaws and indestructible enemies. Kids will surely tire of it immediately.
Number 61. Robocop.
The game allows the player to play as RoboCop and uncover a sinister plot. As a last hope, RoboCop must capture, destroy, or arrest hostile characters in a desperate search for clues and evidence. RoboCop has a heavy amount of horrible problems that render the game practically unplayable at times, and when it comes to graphics, RoboCop just doesn't look good at all. Every environment in the game is drab, ugly, and extremely poorly textured. Every single aspect of RoboCop feels like it was thrown together at the last minute, and the end result is a game that, for all intents and purposes, is just no fun at all.
Number 60. Irritating Stick.
Oh my god. Okay. Irritating Stick is based on a Japanese game show. On the show, contestants take a giant electrical rod and maneuver it through metal maze within a time limit. Irritating Stick captures some of the essence of the TV show, but in the end, it just isn't any fun, and in fact, it's irritating to play, so just avoid it, seriously.
Number 59. Platoon.
The video game adaptation of the critically acclaimed Charlie Sheen movie did as video game adaptations are supposed to do. Suck. But this game sucked more than normal. The bullets that were fired travelled slowly, enemy soldiers were always able to appear out of nowhere, such as dropping from the sky, landing on top of you and killing you instantly. Setting the game in a jungle maze with repeating scenery robbed players of any sense of direction, and made the game a complete waste of time and money.
Number 58. Mario's Early Years, Preschool Fun.
Mario's Early Years. Preschool Fun is a one-class ticket straight to hell, which completely makes the Nintendo team feel uncomfortable every time this piece of shit is mentioned. The voices in the game always have a second-long pause in between every word, making it sound like a robotic kid talking to you like a complete dumbass. There also seems to be a frame rate issue, as the music constantly speeds up and slows down at random intervals. For no logical reason, the graphics completely destroy the sprites of Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Yoshi as they appear flatter, and Yoshi becomes horribly thin when he faces the screen. The content is boring, and even preschoolers will find nothing fun in this useless garbage.
Number 57. Kabuki Warriors.
This game almost killed Microsoft's video game dreams. Kabuki Warriors graphics are about half of a step above its gameplay. Opening and ending animated sequences are very poor, in-game animations are just as bad. The game had one major flaw though. If you can master the A button, you will go far in this game. So the shallow fighting system, ugly characters, general laziness involved in Microsoft for approving this game is just fucking simply disgusting.
Number 56. Catechumen.
The game is set in Roman times right after the advent of Christianity. You play a nameless catechumen, set forth by an angel to free your imprisoned teacher, all the while saving Roman minds from demon infestation. In today's day and age, it really needs to be more compelling. The game is visually enough to give you a headache at times. Objects in the distance have the wrong degree of sharpness. Rendered bitmaps are slightly blurry, and the animation is limited to just a few stick figure movements. If things weren't weird enough, the music is terrifying. Most of the game manages to turn out some generic action game music. Other time you get creepy demon sounds, evil rumblings from left to right, and then for no reason at all, you'll walk into a room and be blasted by heavy metal! What the seriously? While the game is not entirely as broken as it sounds, it's still pretty shoddy, and best to check it out for yourself.
Number 55. Elf Bowling.
To begin with, you can already get this game as freeware on your PC. The DC version is even worse, as they remove some animations and options, which is unacceptable since games were so minimalist in the first place, but even then, everything is about as awful as it gets. The graphics are pathetic, the music is all but non-existent, and the sound is bad. Gameplay-wise, just above poor.
Number 54. Bad Boys, Miami Takedown.
This game was released to coincide with Bad Boys 2. It had two horrible representations of Martin Lawrence and Will Smith that somehow managed to be even worse by spouting horrible dialogue. The controls in this game are extremely broken, and when you shoot, you are actually expected to have terrible aiming.
Number 53. FBI, Hostage Rescue.
The game is the epitome of terrible programming and AI. Gameplay problems crop up everywhere you look. There's no way to tone down the high mouse sensitivity. Unlocked doors sometimes open on their own accord, and sometimes they don't. Players can get stuck in the scenery, meaning they need to restart the mission. Often the game will crash and revert back to the desktop. The game's presentation doesn't fare much better than the gameplay. Characters repeat the same lines over and over. The weapons sound generic. There's no reason at all to buy this game when you can play better games like Counter-Strike, SWAT 3, or Rainbow Six.
Number 52. Star Wars, Masters of Terras Gassi.
I'm going to start off by saying I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I've never even heard about this game, but from what I've looked at it, it looks absolutely horrible and disgraces the whole entire franchise. Basically, it features a bunch of beloved Star Wars characters and a whole lot of annoying second stringers beating the ever-loving crap out of each other in a stiff and badly designed manner. It also leads to some pretty confusing questions, like, why would a Jedi need to use hand-to-hand combat when they have a lightsaber that basically just leaps into their hand, and the ability to throw things around with their mind, and essentially no need to use their fist to beat somebody up whatsoever? Even the most rabid Star Wars fan would chuck the thing into a deep hole and forget about it.
Number 51. Catfight.
From the opening's options screen, the game is absolutely impossible to control. Catfight's graphics are blocky and pixelated, and the color palette is horrible. The soundtrack consists of annoying and repetitive squeals backed up by a heavy metal guitar. And adding to insult to injury, turning the sound off in the options menu has absolutely no effect.
Number 50. Fifth Element.
The graphics are grainy, loaded with seams, awkward perspectives, blind platform jumps, and pop-ups from the get-go, and you know what's better? They don't improve. The enemy AI is laughable as well, and when in the same room with several enemies, if you're attacking one, the others seem to just linger around and move up when the first guy's down. The game's not fun, not pretty, and definitely not challenging. Do yourself a favor and buy the movie and not the game. Seriously. Don't.
Number 49. The New Testament.
You play as a person who follows Jesus through his history of the New Testament, from his time with John the Baptist to his crucifixion and resurrection. Sounds like a good enough game, but this is where things start getting a little bit strange. First of all, it's built on an engine created for wrestling games, and is pretty violent and bloody. The game is unrated, but I'm sure it would get an M for violence if it was actually released. What's more is that the eye animations are pretty freaky, how they continuously stare like a madman, like it just did something horribly wrong. The game itself does provide some unrealistic, albeit entertaining character customization, such as making your character anything from a giant to a tiny little man. The dialogue speeches are pretty disturbing too, especially when you see Jesus quoting things like destroying mankind by shooting fire from your fingertips, or touch me again and I will kill you. There are also some pretty weird quotes in the loading screens from people like Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, Osama bin Laden. Wait. Osama bin Laden? What? Barack Obama, Bruce Lee, and even Kanye West. That made no sense in a biblical game whatsoever. It's like some sort of mashup of Christianity with all sorts of false religions. It sort of stops your gaming experience for a while and makes you really question some things.
Number 48. Jumper, Griffin's Story.
Even with its teleportation spin, this game is a derivative fighter that looks as bad as it plays. Technical glitches mean half of Griffin's body will get stuck in a wall and the camera will be temporarily positioned behind the wall Griffin is fighting there, so you can't even see who you're brawling against. Do yourself a favor and watch the impressive movie instead. You'll find a lot more enjoyment from watching that than playing this piece of shit.
Number 47. Revelations 2012.
Just when we thought the zombie survival horror games couldn't get any worse, we get this. Revelations 2012 is hands down the worst first-person shooter horror survival game ever. It just looks like a Left 4 Dead mod, and to say it's classed as a full game is disgusting. We have bad AI, worse than the ones in Left 4 Dead series, a stupid plot to the story which involves Mayans' end of the world theory, and laughable sound effects. Revelations 2012 is just pure garbage, and you shouldn't play it. And if you're trying to find a better review than this one, good luck.
Number 46. Aquaman, Battle for Atlantis.
This was named as the worst GameCube game ever, and I can see why. At first, the fighting just seems easy and stupid, but eventually the gameplay reveals itself to be annoying and frustrating. The camera, once again, like the rest of these games, operates on its own free will during combat, and often ends up positioning itself in a way that gives you virtually no perspective on the action, and has a tendency to move violently and randomly, and it'll give you more of a headache than anything. Most of the time, the game moves at a reasonable frame rate, though there's some truly bad choppiness during the submarine sequences. The sound is even worse, and consists solely of an adventure-toned score and some bland punch and kick sounds.
Number 45. Spice World.
The Spice World video game stars the Spice Girls! Woohoo! In this thoughtless, rushed mess of a game, the ultimate goal is to set up a Spice Girls concert. Sounds like a blast to me. You guide your hideous, super deformed Spice Girl of choice through mixing your own version of a Spice Girls song from the very small library of songs that this game offers, and they don't even play the whole song. In the end, you get to see the girls dance for you. And that's it. The whole game can be finished in 10 minutes. That is, of course, if you even can survive that 10 minutes without dying of boredom first.
Number 44. Taxi Racer.
It feels like you're trapped in a never-ending cycle, forever doomed to be driving down the same road again and again. There's no story to that at all. The game suffers from a huge amount of technical bugs. Sometimes you'll be driving along just fine, when suddenly the road beneath you vanishes and you fall into a never-ending void. Same goes with the buildings and other cars, who will one minute be there, the next they won't. Either flying, falling, or just suddenly vanish without a trace before your eyes.
Number 43. Hong Kong 97.
A game made in Japan in 1995 for the Super Famicom by Happy Soft Limited. The game has gained a cult following in Japan and Taiwan for its notoriously poor quality. It has been ranked a Kuso game, literally meaning shitty game in Japanese. A game considered so bad that it's good. The game handles much like a bad version of Robotron, and if Chin is hit by anything, the game is automatically over, and a gruesome image of a corpse appears on the game over screen.
Number 42. Trespasser.
It looked like a great game when announced. It had good gameplay when it worked, and it had one of the most interesting features a game could have at the time. The new mechanics was the ability to control your character's arm and hands. Trouble was, it sucked. Apart from looking like an elephant's trunk with fingers, your arms and hands had a tendency to ignore what you told it to do. You felt as graceful and useful as a drunk searching for the front door keys, and with a considerable number of bugs, pathetic frame rates and difficult gameplay, it's no wonder why many gamers laid down and let the raptors munch them into lunch.
Number 41. Descent to Undermountain.
Okay, let's see. The graphics are horrible, there's a terrible frame rate, uninspiring story, weak audio, boring gameplay, and repetitive mini-quests filled with bugs are all what came with this PC game back so early in the 90s. The inclusion of talking to monsters by clicking on the text and speech dialogue also became boring too. One game you should definitely avoid.
Number 40. Home Alone 2.
It's a car crash of a game. It looks bad and plays worse, and it's one of those games that will probably leave you wondering why you didn't spend that part of your life, now forever lost, doing something more fun like shooting zombies or flying a jet. It's difficult to think of one single redeeming feature of this game that really sets it apart from other games. We'll simply say that Home Alone 2 is quite terrifyingly awful, and that if you've never played it, just do yourself a favor and don't even try it.
Number 39. Captain Novelin.
First off, this is a game about diabetes. Yes, diabetes. And from the looks of it, it was put together not to educate children about it, but to blatantly taunt their disease. Captain Novelin only has one ability, hopping. And since the control is so bad, he usually can't even do that right. Your main enemy is a bouncing donut or a walking snack. To be honest, the whole premise is ridiculous that there is really no reason at all to play this in the first place.
Number 38. X-Men.
The first thing that you'll notice is that the one-player mode forces you to take a CPU-controlled second player who just seems to have a completely random AI routine. Usually keeps running up against a wall or into enemies, and takes your power-up and eventually dies in some trap. Some basic enemies emerge from the ground without warning and are right in front of you, which causes you to take a cheap, unavoidable hit of damage. Even worse, there are parts of the floor on many stages that cause damage to your character without looking like any kind of hazard. This game stands as a true test of how bad a comic-based game could be, and a shining example of the fact that companies know comic fans will buy a game no matter how sucky it looks.
Number 37. Conquest of the Planet Earth.
This horrible Xbox Live indie game cost 240 Microsoft points and is probably one of the worst first-person shooters of all time. The graphics are bland, the interface is terrible, and the level design is boring. The game seems to have some sort of light problem too, with the whole game turning black for no reason. There's no story to the game, and the overall feel itself lacks polish. This game should be removed from the marketplace and is definitely one to avoid for every gamer.
Number 36. Human Killing Machine.
Human Killing Machine for the Atari is a ripoff of the first Street Fighter game made by Tiertex. The game lacks special moves, a two-player mode, and scrolling levels. There are god-awful ethnic stereotypes in the game and occasionally cruelty to animals. Starting off at the bad controls resulted in making the game more difficult to beat. Furthermore, the developers made it so all of a given character's frames of animation could be squashed into a single screen's worth of space, which had the unfortunate consequence of the final boss having only 6 frames of animation.
Number 35. Xenophage, Alien Bloodsport.
Xenophage Alien Bloodsport is a pretty bad one-on-one fighting game in the same style as Mortal Kombat, featuring some ridiculous characters to play as. First of all, the characters aren't hand-drawn or digitized, but graphically rendered. Also, the game uses a technique first seen in Samurai Showdown, where the view zooms in and out to give the players the best possible view of the action. Not the best idea. It's bound to give you a headache after a while.
This video contains strong language, used in a funny context. Viewer discretion advised. Number 34. Zelda, The Wand of Gamelon.
Alright, so people have been telling me I've been yelling a little too much. So here's the plan. Once we've talked about how shit this game is, do us a favor and don't even remember this game. Ever. The gameplay is almost as deep and engaging as flipping options on a DVD menu. The game's cutscenes and graphics are horrendous. They look like they were drawn in Microsoft Paint! And the animations are just bad. The graphics in-game are alright, but gameplay-wise, it's boring and frustrating. Your character walks too slow, and every single ruby, yes, they're called ruby and not rupee, will slow you down. So in the end, it's more of a chore to collect things!
Number 33. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the NES is just like the characters it's named after, except they're both evil. The gameplay mechanic in this 2D side-scroller is that Dr. Jekyll walks to the right, whereas Mr. Hyde walks to the left. With minimal dangers for Dr. Jekyll that are rare inconvenience at most, and dying as the aggressive Mr. Hyde for absolutely no reason, this is something more than walking down your local street with an insane headache.
Number 32. Universal Studios Theme Park Adventure.
If your parents can't afford to take you to Universal Studios in Florida, you're going to play this game, and you're going to like it. Nope, you're not going to go on the rides. Oh no. You're going to be performing menial labor by picking up trash, throwing barrels at sharks, and doing what Woody Woodpecker tells you to do for stamps. An absolute disgrace of a game. Horrible.
Number 31. Space Ace.
While Space Ace already didn't exactly work in the arcades, the mere idea of porting the game on a 16-bit console like the Super Nintendo already was a terrible one from the start. This dreadful and horrendous gaming experience is quite possibly the game with the worst control scheme ever, making Space Ace nearly unplayable. The main problem with this game is the unresponsive controls. Once an enemy appeared on screen, you had to push a button in order to draw the gun and kill the approaching enemy. Sounds easy in theory, but first of all, game handles the reception of your commands in an extremely sluggish and downright awful way, making the entire procedure a matter of luck instead of skill. So, just don't buy this piece of fucking shit.
Number 30. American Gladiators.
Unfortunately, the game's events and opponents are mostly broken and more unforgiving than Gears of War 2's bots on Insane. The graphics are poor, with horrible and shitty sound and music and terrible controls. One example is like when climbing the wall, the players had to mash A and B repeatedly to climb the obstacle's wall, with a gladiator attempting to pull them off. Frustrating doesn't cut it. Somehow, the developers managed to scrape together a shitstorm of crap ideas and minigames from the TV show and shipped this out and handed it to us.
Number 29. Custer's Revenge.
Not a lot can be said about Custer's Revenge, the first video game to feature nudity and sexual acts in it. Wow. Released for the Atari 2600, the player controls General Custer as he has to make his way across the screen bearing a huge erection, avoiding arrows in order to get a tied-up Native American woman and rape her. Huh. As you can expect, the game came under opposition from women's rights groups, had an 11 million lawsuit filed against it, and has therefore been labeled as one of the worst video games ever made.
Number 28. Robo-Demons.
This game had so many problems. Recycled character sprites, clashy colors, flickering graphics, distorted sound, and repetitive and frustrating gameplay. Robo-Demons isn't extremely bad, but the size of each level only spans about 5 screens in length, with 2 different levels of platforms you have to traverse, effectively doubling the length. Robo-Demons is the kind of game that you might want to play out of curiosity if it were given to you for free, or a friend gave it to you knowing it was shit. So do yourself a favor and put it with the rest of the worst games to collect dust.
Number 27. Heroes of the Lens.
Supposedly, your mission in this game is to retrieve the disc of Miska Hall or something like that, but apart from the story, you're basically looking at a horrible mess of gameplay bugs and technical glitches. Bad color palette of graphics and shit around design. The music consists of a 30-second loop of a song that drones on and on again. In any case, with any normal gamer, you'll play, figure it's crap, and never play it again.
Number 26. Transformers.
After the epileptic flashing screen, players took a role of a completely planned robot who had to shoot enemies and avoid projectiles that you couldn't even see with the human eye. The graphics were terrible and the sound lagged with a terrible frame rate. You also had to collect letters that spelled out Rodimus and then beat the game to play as Rodimus Prime. Oh, if you beat the game with them, then you got congratulations and your high score. It's yet another horrible video game that truly deserves to be removed off the face of this fucking planet.
Number 25. Club Drive.
Most of the missions in this game have you driving an RC car around a badly rendered living room to collect glowing balls of string. Sounds like a good idea on paper, but when you realize you can actually drive directly through the chair legs and walls! And so it sort of loses its charm. Running into objects shows off the game's ridiculous physics. It's hard to say whether it's a glimpse into the future of driving or just someone being an idiot.
Number 24. Extreme Bull Rider.
The bull riding half of Extreme Bull Rider is pretty simple and a bit stupid. You basically wiggle your mouse until you fall off the bull or for a full 8-second ride, whichever comes first. Even though you have an entire arena area to ride in, the bull only stays within a few feet of the opening gate. The bull riding segment isn't anything to look at either. The best way to fight the bull is to pick up violins and colourful balls while avoiding cow pies and a terribly animated bull. Extreme Bull Rider has very little, if any, redeeming qualities, and is simply not worth wasting your time or any words on it at all.
Number 23. Karate.
Karate for the Atari 2600 was a nearly unplayable fighting game with extremely unresponsive controls and almost no chance to win. There's only so much you can do with a digital joystick and one button. Some even considered it the worst Atari 2600 game ever, as it led to broken joysticks because of the product wasn't made properly.
Number 22. Captain Planet.
This game is absolutely no fun. Video games are supposed to be fun, and in a good way to pass the time. But this game is so stupid and annoying that's not even worth the time to play it. The controls suck, and without an instruction manual, you got no idea what the hell you're doing. Some of the abilities seem to have absolutely no use either, and are just there because they were in the show, and the sound in the game is downright horrible. All we're treated to is the standard beeps and boops and the occasional hum. Captain Planet is just what you'd expect from a game based on a children's cartoon about pollution. It does nothing more than pollute our planet with horrible video games that shouldn't even exist.
Number 21. Barbie.
Barbie, are you fucking kidding me? Dude, no. Tats, you can read this.
Well, this is probably one of the worst games ever created. One of the main purposes of this game existing is, we can only assume to tell your kids never take drugs, or else you may find yourself in the worlds like this game. The controls are clunky, the graphics are terrible, and the music is excruciating. The game doesn't even offer a decent story, it's just a weird messed up dreams that Barbie decided to have after eating too much cheese one night. This game isn't even worth a rental, just avoid it.
Number 20. Extreme Paint Brawl.
The game employed outdated build engine graphics and had a non-existent AI with computer-controlled teammates who mindlessly ran straight forward at the beginning of the match only to be stopped by an object in their path. And enemies would also have seemingly perfect aim, with nearly every shot fired in the player's direction scoring a hit. Although the game only installed and launched under Windows 95 and higher, the actual game was a DOS program, often causing compatibility problems, especially with newer computers.
Number 19. Where's Waldo?
Just as in the popular Waldo book series, the player must locate Waldo in various crowded scenes. The difficult part about this is that in the game, it's not much the placement of Waldo, but the fact that pretty much everyone looks like Waldo. To sum it up, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Because of the pixel mouse and time limit, it's more of a chore than it needs to be. One level has you trying to find Waldo in a cave, which is a black screen which highlights where Waldo is briefly, meaning that you basically just gotta guess where Waldo might be? Where's Waldo, you may ask? The answer? No one really gives a shit.
Number 18. Pac-Man.
No, we're not talking of the original arcade version here. No, this is the worst version for the Atari. It's still the same gameplay as the original, but it just doesn't work. The producer was given a limited time frame by Atari to complete the project, and the game just doesn't play well at all. The gameplay and audio-visual are completely different from the arcade version, and gamers return the game in large quantities, not surprising.
Number 17. Night Trap.
The notorious subject of congressional hearings was pulled from certain store shelves after senators whipped into a frenzy by a scene featuring a girl in a nightgown being attacked. Despite the lack of graphic violence and nudity, the game about girls at a sleepover being attacked by vampires will probably never see a sequel. And for good reason. The gameplay sucked. The idea sounded stupid as fuck. If you've just gotta see how bad the acting, writing, and traps are, then just see some of these clips.
You monster. Let's have the boys change the code to be safe to yellow.
Don't worry, it's all in the fingers. Good hunting.
I'm pulling the plug on you before you do any more damage. Breaking contact.
Number 16. Shaq Fu.
Shaq Fu for the Sega Genesis is probably the worst conceived game ever to come out of any platform system ever. You play as Shaq somehow in Tokyo, where you are discovered by some Zen karate master who says that you have to come from a distant planet to save the world. After you endure the blatantly uninspired storyline, you have to endure the worst two-player fighting game of all time. The controlling in this game is incomprehensible. The best thing you can do is just hammer the buttons of your controller with your hands and watch the screen. With a name like Shaq Fu, you had to know this game was going to be bad, but you were not sure for how bad it was going to be until you actually played it yourself.
Number 15. Superman 64.
With some of the worst controls ever for a video game, you press a button to do something and it either doesn't respond or it does something completely different. Superman 64 is just bad, very bad in fact. With purple sky and the city of Metropolis looking like a complete flat wasteland with no one around, the animation is slow and the character you control bears no resemblance to Superman whatsoever. It's notorious for negative reception and is considered one of the worst games of all time. This game was largely criticized for being repetitive, difficult, and confusing. This game was one of the most atrocious creations in gaming history. Seriously, avoid this piece of shit.
Number 14. Color a Dinosaur.
Color a Dinosaur is an example of a game unlikely to have much appeal for anyone above the ages of 3 to 6 years old. All it has is 16 static pictures of dinosaurs, which can be colored with up to 3 colors. Holy shit! There's not even a save feature. This game is a waste of time and money.
Number 13. Conan.
This game doesn't share anything in common with other Conan titles. In this game, all Conan does is jump around and kill the same 2 or 3 bad guys over and over again. The point of this game seems to be escaping whatever level you're placed in. This game can be summed up in 2 words. Utterly soulless. The graphics are pathetic, the sound is dull, and the gameplay is completely repetitive. Just avoid it. Really, please, just avoid it.
Number 12. Back to the Future.
Plot of the game doesn't really follow the movie that well, and in fact, calling this game Back to the Future is an insult to the movie itself. From the looks of it, LJN made a random-ass game and slapped Back to the Future on it. The graphics are terribly bad, as the main character Marty doesn't even have the slightest resemblance to him at all. Most of the time, it's extremely difficult to see where you're supposed to go, and in the end, you treat everything you see as a hazard. And for some reason, the developers didn't make anything that you do in the game follow the movie. In the first level, the screen scrolls on its own and you have to collect clocks so that your family doesn't disappear. The annoying part is the timer. It goes super fast and barely gives you enough time to beat it. And once you beat it, you get a frustratingly difficult root beer tapper style minigame that gets even more difficult when you play. Failure to beat the level results in a trip back to the previous level. Whoop-de-fucking-do.
Number 11. Dragster.
Dragster is a blocky, garish, and can be beaten in mere seconds. Dragster is one of those shortest games ever created by Activision and isn't worth the asking price. Your goal in Dragster is to get your car across the finish line before your opponent. Using the joystick, you must rev, clutch, and shift your way to victory, but if you rev too much, your engine will blow up, and you'll be out of the race.
Number 10. E.T.
No matter how you rate it, E.T. was a misforgotten product that deserved to be buried. The point of the game is to find pieces of your ship in order to get home, but the pieces are found in what only can be described as pits that E.T. falls into periodically. It's been rumoured that there are 5 levels of almost identical gameplay. This game single-handedly destroyed Atari and its legacy. They produced so many cartridges of this game that they were never sold, and they actually had to buy land in New Mexico and create an ET landfill in the desert. The game is commonly recited as one of the main causes of the video game crash of 1983.
Number 9. Cheetah Man 2.
This game is programmed into cartridges while still unfinished and contains the same clunky movements and sounds from Action 52. The inability to crouch or shoot while jumping, and a game-breaking glitch which makes level 4 unbeatable and makes it to the list for the sole reason. Oh, and if you use a Game Genie or hacked ROM to skip the last 2 levels, there's no ending programmed.
Number 8. Bubsy 3D.
A game infamously known for being the worst 3D platformer of 1996. A game that was so bad, it just slaughtered the entire Bubsy franchise. Almost everything in Bubsy 3D is rendered in flat, shaded polygons, with a few uninspired textures peppered in between. The controls feel both stiff and slippery all at the same time. Walking is cumbersome, and the slippery and slow turning doesn't help matters. You move like a frickin' tank. There's no reason Bubsy 3D should have been this bad. Even for a game developed in 1996, it comes off looking like a computer science student's midterm project that sucks. Hopelessly bland and utterly pointless, Bubsy 3D is, in a word, a mess.
Number 7. Action 52.
An unlicensed game with 52 games in one cartridge, created by Active Enterprises for the NES, and later the Sega Genesis. Action 52 is one of the worst games ever made. Poorly programmed, all 52 games are loaded with bugs and glitches, and as a result are impossible to beat. Some games won't even load, and the graphics, sounds, and music suck. Almost all of the quality of the titles in this cartridge are poor. Virtually almost all of them play like a first-year programming student's first project with poorly drawn graphics, terrible sounds that never deserve to be called music, horrendous play control, and some of the worst bugs ever burnt onto a ROM chip.
Number 6. Desert Bus.
The objective of the game is to drive a bus from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas in real time, at a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour, along a road which is perfectly straight, a feat which requires 8 hours of continuous play to complete. There are no passengers, no pause button, no traffic, and little scenery. The problem is that the bus veers very slightly to the right, meaning that it cannot be left to drive by itself, and if you leave the road, you'll be towed back to Tucson. In real time.
Number 5. Big Rigs Over the World Racing.
The first idea of this game ever being a racing game is sketchy at best. When the contest begins, your opponents don't really put much effort into being there at all. That's because the creators forgot to give them any line of functions and they drive straight through the entire race, or sometimes they aren't even programmed to race at all. There's nothing to avoid during the race. Don't get me wrong, there are buildings and bridges and other obstacles, but unlike in other racing games, in big rigs you can drive straight through them without even slowing down. The programmers have not even programmed collision detection into the game, or any of the obstacles. No matter what happens in each race, whether you're winning or losing, the words "You're winner" in horrifying English sticks up on the screen. The list of negatives go on forever. Furthermore, you can literally drive off the level by heading into the mountains. Knowing how bad this game actually was, I'm sure there's many of you out there that's never heard of this game before, and are now frantically searching the internet just trying to find out this game for themselves.
Number 4. Crazy Bus.
Okay, what the hell was up with that music just now? Well, yep, that was the game's title music. Also, the game itself is a simulator, and truly one of the worst simulators out there. You drive a bus to the right and honk your horn. That's it. No kidding. The graphics look like they were drawn in a Microsoft Paint or something. I still use that. And the photos of some of the buses are heavily pixelated. It seems the music only exists at the title screen and nowhere else. However, rumors are flying around that a sequel was released called Crazy Bus 2, which is even worse.
This video contains strong language, used in a funny context. Viewer discretion advised. Number 3. The Town with No Name.
The town with No Name is a video game on the Commodore Amiga made by Delta 4 Interact. You know what? Fuck this. No. Fuck it. Fuck it. Fuck it.
The Town with No Name is a video game on the Commodore Amiga made by Delta 4 Interactive. The story involves the man with no name getting off of a train into the town with no name, and he gets greeted by gunfire. When he shoots the guy who apparently is Evil Eb's little brother, Evil Eb decides to take care of the business and gets his minions to kill the guy who killed his brother. Now the guy has to travel all over the little town to find all the enemies and kill them before he dies himself. Premise is simple, but let's just see why this game sucks. First off, the graphics is made in Microsoft Paint, you can just tell that. The sound is poor with occasional music being played now and then, and the voice acting is truly the worst.
There are a great many people, stranger, but most of them are dead.
Next you'll be telling me you don't like strangers round here.
So bad it's going to be counted in the top list of bad voice acting in games. On that note, there really isn't much to do in the game, and it can be beaten fairly quickly. This game has also been dubbed True Shit, The Town with No Game, Broke Graphics Mountain, and The Bad, The Worst, and The Shitty by YouTube Poops.
A lot of weather we've been having recently.
Number 2. Psycho Killer.
Psycho Killer is a sorry excuse for a game. Developed by the same creators behind The Town with No Name, you play a no-name individual whose car broke down on the side of the road and wanders into the woods for some reason, I don't know. And he happens to find himself being chased by a murderous individual whom we don't know, and why is he trying to kill this man? None of this game makes sense. You run around the woods and end up in a train station and have to make certain choices that make absolutely no sense. If you choose one thing, the guy teleports where he is, and it's just all a giant load of shit. In the end, this game is stupid, pathetic, moronic, and you'd have more entertainment probably loading up a shitty Flash game on Newgrounds than playing this, because someone could easily make something better than this in about 5 minutes in Adobe Flash.
Number 1. Number 1. What the fuck's going on? Narration please.
Oh my god. Not that game. Absolutely.
You're doing it now
not
to finish
that
off this
game.
video.
No! You're not making me do that, Tats. No!
You're doing it now to finish off this video.
No! That game is the worst thing on the face of the earth. Do you hear me? The worst abomination to ever be created.
No
ever.
fucking excuses, man.
Absolutely
Get the fuck
not.
in there.
No,
Go.
no, no,
Go.
no, no! I am not going to record.
You're doing it now to finish off this video. Do you know how many number lines I had to record?
Just listen to the robot, just listen to the robot for a second. He's actually saying something valuable for once. Listen to XJ, he's always right. Most of the time.
Finally. Plumbers don't wear ties.
Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is considered the most horrendous video game probably ever. What's more, I'm not even sure if it's classified as a game. You virtually choose options and that's about it. The story progresses through that. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is a horrible series of silly still pictures of a sexy girl, Jane, we have to follow around in San Francisco. What's more is that the 3DO is capable of moving videos, so why are we only shown a slideshow of really bad images? Halfway through the game, things turn worse as we are presented to some stupid rejects and some horrible digital effects that it's so laughable and unfortunately unavoidable. Take your damn clothes off! And nearly unmanageable auto controls. It's a wonder this game got out of the gate at all. Gameplay wise, you'll be motoring a slugly.
This is talk shit. Sorry, my bad.
Spirit of Speed, fuck. Spirit of Speed, or at least its Dreamcast version, but shit.
Here, especially considering Sega's. Oh shit. Sagas is a full price game. I said Sega's. The original set of Leisure Suit Larry games were intelligent, tongue-in-cheek adventure titles. but box office bust, the moronic